You ever hear of Redikai? Good, because it's not what we're talking about today. Hey there, kids, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Uncle Frank, hoping that you are having a great day. And in today's video, we are going to be covering a bit of a controversial topic, one that I am not particularly great at articulating my thoughts on, but I hope that you guys will bear with me, because in today's video, we're going to be talking about Flesh and Blood finance. Specifically, the cost of Flesh and Blood singles for the higher end cards, legendaries, fableds, marvels. Those are more of a collectible, but you know what I'm talking about. Ever since I joined the Flesh and Blood game to actually play it rather than just buy and sell some of it, I've seen grumblings online complaining about the price of higher end cards, some of the rarer cards in the game. But it seems more and more often recently, there's been louder and louder voices online complaining about the cost of building a competitive deck, bemoaning the availability of certain cards, and proposing a litany of solutions to this pricing issue that range from aggressive reprint practices up and including just outright banning cards over a certain price point or rarity. And those are terrible options, yeah, don't get me wrong. But I want to address the core concept of the argument itself, the core complaint that people are making online. And don't worry, this is going to be a short video. I'm going to try to keep this brief. People online complaining, people in general complaining about the price of a collectible, a card game, etc. When they are complaining about the price of something, they tend to be missing the point. You don't need the fancy cardboard. You don't, you can go about your day and your life without ever needing the Heart of Findle or the Shard of the Arknight. You don't need them. You don't need the alternate art. Was it Dynasty? Did the fabled Command and Conquer? I think it was Dynasty, right? I might be wrong. You don't need those expensive cards. You want them. You want them. But if you can't afford them, you grumble online and complain that they're too expensive and that they need to be reprinted. And I don't really think that's a solution. And I know that I'm not the greatest at arguing for why expensive cards in a collectible hobby are a good thing, but I do believe that it's better in the long term for collectability to be maintained. And by that I mean, if people are getting into a collection, they want their collection to be... I don't necessarily think everybody who's getting into collecting cards is out to make a buck and flip the cards they buy in 5 years for 1,000x their money or whatever. But I do think that there's a general hope for a lot of people entering into a collectible that the money they put in, they'll be able to pull out at some point. If they buy a card for $100, they can sell it for at least $100. That's a general hope that a lot of people have. And like it or not, people like making money. I know, surprise, right? People like money, though. And it doesn't matter, if you're spending $100 on a card or even $5 on a card, It's always a feel bad when you buy something and then down the road it's worth less, right? And part of why this is something worth talking about is because that whole retention of value angle that a lot of people entering a collectible, that thing that they appreciate a lot, it has a ripple effect on the entire... That's a very loud trend. It has a ripple effect on the entire perception of the game, the reputation of the game. And by reputation of the game, I mean when a Flesh and Blood card comes out and is not reprinted, and a whole slat of these cards comes out and they just don't get reprinted, LSS, the makers of Flesh and Blood, they build a reputation as a company that they are not going to destroy collectability by aggressively reprinting their cards. This is in sharp contrast to games like Magic the Gathering or YuGiOh, where there's basically zero chance that a card you buy in those games is going to retain its value long term, especially YuGiOh. YuGiOh is a really bad example, okay? YuGiOh, it's almost a certainty that if you have an expensive meta-relevant staple card for Yu-Gi-Oh, it's going to lose like 90% of its value over the course of a year. Look at Bonfire. Bonfire released in Maze of the Master. One of the Maze sets. Maze of the Memories, Maze of the Master. One of those Maze of sets. And when it came out, let's talk about this. This is a fun story, okay? When Bonfire came out, it was the hottest card, pun intended, in Yu-Gi-Oh at the time. Every deck that could play it, it was a fire or pyro type reinforcements of the army type effect. And it came out, it was $80. You had Yu-Gi-Oh professional players complaining about the price tag of this one card. You had people online grumbling about the price tag of this one card, okay? Within a year, Bonfire had been reprinted at a 10, and I think it had another reprint. And nowadays, Bonfire is a dollar card. I think there was a collector's rare version that also came out in that same set. It was like $120, and nowadays it's worthless. Fun stuff. You know, and as a consequence of that, as a consequence of cards like Bonfire coming out and then losing 90% of their value, look at what happens to Yu-Gi-Oh sets when they release. Look what stores have to deal with. When it comes to Yu-Gi-Oh, stores have to buy up Yu-Gi-Oh boxes and then sell them as fast as possible before they lose 50% of their sealed price value. You know, Yu-Gi-Oh didn't get to the way it is now overnight. It happened as a result of several years of players looking at how Konami deals with reprints and going, well, there's no real value to be had in holding on to Yu-Gi-Oh boxes. There's no real value to be had in holding on to Yu-Gi-Oh singles from modern sets because it all just loses value because of Konami's aggressive reprints, right? And so Yu-Gi-Oh boxes come out and they lose their value pretty quickly. Some dip as early as release day. Flesh and Blood, meanwhile, they don't do aggressive reprints. They don't do, for the high-end cards, they don't do really aggressive reprints all that often. They don't devalue their sets by ensuring that a high-end card in that set is going to be reprinted to hell and back within the year. And because of that, because they have built that reputation as a collectible, Flesh and Blood boxes, especially recently, have started to really be a hot item on the collector's market and on the second-hand TCG market in general. But I think it's a good thing that Flesh and Blood has cards that are highly sought after and highly aggressively priced. Let's say competitively priced. Because when people see that, when collectors, investors, or whatever have you, see that they see that their collection isn't going to be devalued, they're motivated to stay with the game longer than they would for a game like Yu-Gi-Oh, for instance, or Magic, for instance, where their collection could lose 90% of its value overnight with the wrong reprints. And part of my confidence for the longevity of Flesh and Blood, this is important, the longevity of Flesh and Blood, I think, comes from two things. One, I legitimately believe Flesh and Blood is the best game on the market currently. It's rivaled by Mega Man. I love Mega Man. But that game's dead. But of the current imprint TCGs, I think Flesh and Blood is the best. And I also think that Flesh and Blood's collectability gives it some real staying power, because the collectors, the whales, the investors, all that jazz, they are going to be incentivized to buy the high-end stuff with the expectation that it's going to remain a high-end item. You know, you see a big fancy new gem piece, you see one of those lost treasures, you see one of those shiny alt-arts in Flesh and Blood, and you go, looks like a nice card, and I'm not going to lose my wallet on it. Yes, sirree, I want some of that. So that's really all this video is about, just me, I suppose this is a grumble video in response to grumblings online, which I suppose is pretty immature of me, but at the same time, I just want to put my voice out there and let you guys know that insofar as expensive cards are concerned, I don't think it's a bad thing at all. In fact, I think it's a good thing for the people who are making those grumbles, because they can rest assured that any money they put into those high-end cards, it's probably going to stick around for a while. You know, would I like for the cards I want to be more affordable? Absolutely. Yes. The Marvel Tech Leviathan is hundreds of dollars. I very much want one for my personal collection. I can't afford that. I'm poor as hell. But I also don't think aggressively reprinting that particular card and that particular foiling is the solution that I think it is. Because devaluing not just the card, but the reputation you have as a collectible, that can do some long-term damage. And I think overall, unless this is making the right call when it comes to reprints, by not destroying that reputation, by not destroying that collectability, by not destroying that value, it's a good thing. It's a tough pill to swallow, don't get me wrong. But we've seen what happens when we've seen what happens when with aggressive reprints. We've seen what happens when cards are made a little more than, you know, when they're worth less than the cardboard they're printed on, the cardstock they're printed on. We see what happens with YuGiOh, where boxes are only holding their value because of a handful of cards that might be worth something. It's crazy. My next video is going to be more positive. I might talk about like Hecatomb again or Mythos, but just wanted to put this out there. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please like, share, and subscribe. Let me know what you guys think about the entire thing in the comment section below. Maybe you have a strongly, maybe you have an opinion. Maybe you agree with me. Maybe you think I'm an idiot. Let me know. I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks for watching.